Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Grams. I'm with the GVSU Veterans History Project. Today we are meeting with Mel Bauman. And Mel, tell us a little bit about yourself. When were you born and where?
I was born in April 11th, 1945 in Detroit. And then when I was about 2, my dad changed jobs and we transferred here to Grand Rapids. So basically I was raised in Grand Rapids.
Okay. And where did you go to high school here in Grand Rapids?
Went to high school at Ottawa.
Okay.
The old Ottawa.
Did you play any sports in high school?
Football.
Football.
Yeah.
Okay. And when did you graduate?
1963.
1963. Did you immediately think about going in the military back then, or did you do something in between first?
No, I didn't. I was just kind of putzing around, not doing a whole lot of anything. My dad died in '61, so I was sticking pretty close to home, helping my mom out.
Okay.
And my older brother was in school, and my younger sister, she was still living at home. So,
Okay. So when did you first start thinking about joining the military?
oh, probably, I would say probably around 64, 65, I was thinking seriously about it.
Okay. And what made you actually finally take that step to go? This is why I want to
I
do.
just didn't see my life going anyplace, and I thought the military was a good way to go.
Okay. So when was the date that you actually joined?
20 July '65.
Okay. And you went into the
Army Reserve.
Army Reserve.
Yeah.
Okay. And where did you go to basic?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, 22 November '65.
And so tell me about basic
And
training.
it was wonderful.
Oh yeah.
It was cold, and when they say there's a lot of stones and rocks there, that's true. It was interesting, but I learned a lot. It was good. It was good.
What was your favorite part of training there?
I guess I kind of enjoyed all of it. My favorite was the rifle training, of course, because I love to shoot. But all of it I enjoyed. Yeah, it was fun. There were parts of it that weren't fun, but I look back at it now and it was kind of fun.
Talk about that.
But I did notice, we were out in the field, and we were having C rations, the old C rations. And this was in '65 now. And the C rations that I was eating were dated 1946. But they weren't bad. They heated up pretty well.
So looking back at training part in basic training and your advanced individual training, what would you say would be the hardest part you went through looking back?
Oh, probably the marching and that kind of stuff, you know, the long marches and stuff. But you get over it,
Okay.
you know. And one time I was on guard duty out at the ammo dump in the middle of the night. And there were, I don't know if they were bobcats or what they were howling, but it was a little uncomfortable. But they didn't bother me, I didn't bother them.
So getting through, you get to graduation of your AIT and
Yep.
basic training.
Yep.
What was graduation like back then?
It was really quite nice. We were supposed to graduate out in the parade field, and it was raining, so we went into that big Quonset hut down there on the parade field at Leonard Wood, which is still there. And it was inside, but it was a nice graduation ceremony, very nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have any family there, but it was okay. Yeah.
So after graduation, what happened then? Did you come back home here, or?
I came back to Grand Rapids, and then I was with the transportation company, and then I just worked my way up in the trans company up until I was first sergeant.
Okay.
And then I was first sergeant there for a while, and then I had the opportunity in 1970, I had the opportunity to start working there full-time as a full-time civilian. And so I was a DA civilian there. And so I did that as well as being in the reserve. And so it was almost like being on active duty because I was there all the time. So anyway, so I did that. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. I'd still be in, but I got old.
So what was the typical day like doing the civilian side and what you did as a civilian contractor there, and opposed to what you were doing as a reservist? What were the typical days like in each of those?
Well, the civilian job was no different than being on active duty running a company. Take care of all the paperwork, the promotions, the pay, blah, blah, blah. And so that was the job during the day. And then when I go there for drills, of course, I was first sergeant. And the first sergeant, you're doing all kinds of different stuff. I mean, you run the unit, but the commander, he kind of sets the policy and you make sure it gets done. And so you're the head of the dragon. But anyway, yeah, first sergeant was the best job I ever had.
Yeah.
That was the best job I ever had. And then I had a friend of mine that was at the battalion across the hall, and he was a full colonel, and he says, I think you ought to put in for a commission. So I don't want a commission. I said, I'm on a fast track to sergeant major. And so he said, well, I think you should. He said, just put in a packet, see what happens. Well, direct commissions were slim to none, but I said, okay, fine, I'll put in for it. So I did. And it was about a year, and nothing happened, and I didn't hear anything. I'm going to shut this thing off. But I didn't hear anything. And so then this one star that used to come in and have me set up, get quarters for him down at Fort Knox so he and his buddies could go golfing. He came in, and he said, "Do you hear anything on your commission yet?" And I said, "No, not yet." He said, "Well, it's been about a year, hasn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "No big hurry." And so anyway, he says, "No, well, I won't tell you what he said, but he says, I'm going to call this guy down at Fifth Army." So he did. And he called the guy that was in charge of the officer branch at Fifth Army, full-time guy, and asked about my packet. And he said, "Yeah, it's in my inbox. I just haven't had time to work on it." And so this general jumped all over this guy. The guy said, "I'll get right on it." Well, within 2 weeks, I got notified to go before the board. So I went down and went before the board down in Indianapolis at Fort Bend. And I knew most of the people on the board because they were all full-time. And so anyway, I went through the motions and went through the board, and they thanked me, I thanked them, and went back to Grand Rapids. I didn't hear anything. And about 3 months later, I got the orders, and I was a captain.
Did after you got the orders to be captain, did you have to go back to like OCS training or officer
Well, I
training
went
or
through,
anything?
I did officer basic, did officer advanced course. I did all that, and then I did the advanced course for medical service corps. And so I got qualified with that, and then I did the advanced course for military police. Did a branch transfer into the MPs.
Where are all these schools at? The courses at?
Well, I did most of them by correspondence.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was just a lot easier.
Okay.
So,
What year were we at when you got your captainship?
it was in October of 1980.
80.
Yeah.
Has it happened before?
Oh, yeah, 1980.
Okay.
And I think the date's on there someplace.
Yep.
But, yeah, so then, so I got that, and then I transferred to Indianapolis. I was down there at the headquarters for 5 years, almost 5 years, working in the training and ops shop. And then transferred back to transferred to Detroit. The CG called me in one night, and he says, "I need you to transfer to Detroit." And I said, "Don't really want to." And he said, "Well, I'm not really asking." He said, "I need you up there." He said, "We have a lot going on. You're the guy that I need up there because you know the state." And so I said, "Well, all right." I says, "How long do I have to be up there?" He said, "Well, probably a year." Well, he didn't tell me that he was retiring in 6 months. So he retired, and after he retired, I got a hold of the new CG, and I said, who I knew, and I says, "Murray told me I could transfer back in a year." So Murray retired. He said, I need you to stay up there. You're doing a good job. So I worked in Detroit, ran the reserve complex in Detroit for 13 years. And then the opportunity came up, because I was coming up close on retirement, the opportunity came up for me to transfer to Grand Rapids to the medical group, which I really didn't care about the medical group, but I transferred as a civilian to run it. And so I transferred back to Grand Rapids when I had the opportunity, and retired out of here in 2005.
Okay.
So I ended up getting 2 retirements, military and civilian.
I got a question going back just a little bit. When you were still a first sergeant and you're doing the 2 different sides, when you were doing the civilian side, did everyone still consider you first sergeant?
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I said you were still the first sergeant at that time. Okay.
That doesn't go away.
Okay.
And in fact, it hasn't happened lately, but my wife and I we'd be in Myers or something. And I'd run into somebody and say, hey, Top, how you doing? I thought, I haven't been a first sergeant in a long time. But that's the last time I saw this guy, see? So we walk away and she said, who was that? And I said, I don't have a clue. But over 40 years, or almost 40 years, I probably worked with several thousand different soldiers. And so you can't remember them all. There's no
Right.
way. But fun time. Had a good time.
Right.
A lot of good experiences. Oh, and then we got back to, when I was in Detroit in 1990, Desert Storm was starting to heat up pretty good. And my wife and I had only been married 9 months, and my 3rd wife, and the first 2 didn't like the military, and unfortunately they didn't have a retirement program, and the Army did, and so if something had to go, it wasn't the Army. So anyway, we got remarried, or we got married about 9 months before Desert Storm really started getting warm. And she said, do you think you're going to get mobilized? I said, nah, don't worry about it. And about 3 weeks later, my secure phone went off, because I had a Stu 3 on my credenza. And normally they tested it the first Monday of the month at 8 o'clock in the morning. You could set your watch with it. And so I'd always get the key out and get ready to go secure. Well, this was not the first Monday, it was like the 3rd Monday. And it wasn't 8 o'clock, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. And the Stu 3 is going off, and I thought, this is not good. So I put it in, and I was the CXO down at the headquarters. Yeah, Mel. Yeah, Tom. Activate your alert roster. You guys are leaving Saturday. This is on Monday. I had 368 troops. We mobilized that following Saturday with all but 2 of them. So that's pretty remarkable. But they were on vacation, so we got them later. So anyway, we were gone for a year. So I called my wife, and I said, yeah, I'll be home tonight. We lived in Ada. The house was in Ada. And here I'm over in Southfield. And she said, what do you come home tonight for? I said, well, I need to get my stuff. I'm leaving Saturday. What? So that's the end of that. And she said, how long are you going to be gone? That's about a year probably. And it was. But hey, you know, the food was good, the pay was good, didn't have to worry about what I was going to wear. Hanging out with your buddies doesn't get any better. So anyway, that was that. So I did that, came back, and then I transferred to Grand Rapids.
So what was it like, the build-up, getting ready to go over the first Gulf War? Getting ready, getting trained up, getting logistically...
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, they sent a mobilization team up to help us, and they helped us with the paperwork and packing and all that stuff. So we just packed up and headed out. It was really quite easy. And we went from Detroit to Fort McCoy, and we stayed there. And then we were supposed to deploy to Iraq, and they changed our orders and kept us at McCoy and had us merge in with the McCoy staff. And so I was made, because years ago, when I was commander of a public affairs detachment down in Indianapolis, when I was a young captain, they looked through my records and saw that I'd gone to public affairs school. They said, we're going to make you the PAO for Fort McCoy. I said, I don't really want to. I'd rather go to Iraq. And they said, no, you're going to be the Fort McCoy PAO. And so I was the PAO for Fort McCoy for a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they said, your office is going to be downstairs. Oh, by the way, the gal that's down there is a civilian. Go down and tell her you're going to take her office. Now, that didn't go over too well. But I said, hey, okay. So I went down and I notified her that I was now her boss. And the post commander wanted a military PAO and not a civilian. And I said, oh, by the way, you'll be my assistant. I said, you get the office in the back, I'm taking yours. And so that was the way, I mean, that's what the boss wanted, so that's how it went. So that went pretty well. And our job, the garrison's job, was to merge with the Fort McCoy staff. And then Fort McCoy's job, we were the biggest mob station in the exercise. And so Fort McCoy's job was to get these units trained up, fitted out, and ship them out and get them ready to go. Well, then on the back side of it, during Desert Fix, we brought back all the equipment and troops back through Fort McCoy and Roke Field, which is a guard facility about 12 miles from McCoy. And so we had a hangar there, and we'd bring them back through there. But we also checked their stuff coming back. And these troops come up with some pretty good ideas on how to stash contraband. And what they were doing is they were taking the spare tires on the back of the trucks, deflate them, take the AK-47s or whatever, wrap them in a rag, stick them inside the tire, re-inflate the tire, put it back on the truck. And then when it got back to the States, and that truck supposedly would get back to their unit, they'd take the tire up, get their goodies out. Well, we got wise to that, so we had several connexes full of contraband. But hey, if they can get away with it, they're going to.
During your time down in Fort McCoy, did your wife ever get to come down and see you while
She
you were
did.
down there? Okay.
I flew her down there, about every other month. She'd fly down for 3-4 days.
Okay.
And I'd get one of the small cottage buildings that they have there. We'd stay there for 2-3 days, and then she'd fly back. So it worked out pretty. It was okay. It was doable.
So, being your time all the way from, when you first enlisted as did you go in as a E1 private?
E1 private, nothing.
Straight nothing, yep. So all the way up to, in 05, a lieutenant colonel.
Mhm.
In all those years and all those different ranks, what would you say first sergeant was your favorite part?
First sergeant was a fun job.
Okay.
I mean, it was, because for anybody that's been a first sergeant, I mean, you're the number one. That's it. And, you get, you're not always the most pleasant person in the world. In fact, my wife said to me, she says, this was after we got married, and of course I was commissioned by then, but she says, I don't know how you can be two people. I says, I'm not following you. She said, well, at home, she said, you're just a great guy, thoughtful, and all this stuff. And she says, I've seen you in uniform when you're working, and you're not a nice guy. She says, everything is all business. And I says, well, that's the way it is. But she couldn't figure that out. But if you're in a situation like me, you've got to be two people.
So do you have any stories from about soldiers that they did that you have that you had to either get on them or something funny they did that just has made you laugh till this day?
A lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of them. I can't really pinpoint any one, but but there were a lot of different
Yeah.
things, a lot, but crazy stuff.
So looking near the end of your service time, leading up to when you were when you retired, did they force retirement on you?
Yeah, when you turn 60,
You were forced retirement.
unless you're a flag officer,
Okay.
then they give you some more time, but when you turn 60, they tell you to go out and graze, and that's okay. You know, 40 years is a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a young man's business. You know, when you turn 60, you really shouldn't be around it. I mean, I'd still be in today, but, you know, when you turn 60, you have to retire, so.
Right.
Yeah, I enjoy the military. I love the Army. But,
So during your whole time in, you worked full time in the military, so you were always in some type of military position, one way or the other, as contractor or as.
yeah.
Or as a soldier. Was there ever any time in there that you ever just were a civilian ever?
No.
No? No?
From 1965 until 2005, I had green blood.
And you didn't go to Vietnam.
Nope.
How'd you get out of that one?
I
Just
have no
unit
idea.
never went?
I have no idea. You go where the Army tells you.
Right.
And so, in their infinite wisdom, they had me doing other stuff.
Okay. Okay. And when you first went in, what was your original job?
Truck driver.
You were truck driver. Okay.
In fact, when I went to Fort Wayne in Detroit, I went for my physical, this sergeant, he says, you know, he said, you really scored high on your test. He says, what would you like to be? I said, well, if I scored that high, I'd like to be an officer. He said, good, you're going to drive a truck. I said, what? You're going to drive a truck? I said, I don't want to drive a truck. He said, I don't care what you want. He said, that's what the Army needs, and so that's what you're going to do. And so I was sent to truck driving school, and I drove Army semis. And that's how I ended up in the 180th Trans Company over here in Grand Rapids. So I drove truck, and so I did that for a while. And then when I got commissioned, of course, like I said, I did a branch transfer to military police.
So between, truck driving, military police, what was your favorite job you did in?
I guess, well, like I say, I think my favorite job was being a first sergeant. That was my favorite. When I got commissioned, there were a lot of different things I did as well, and they were fun, but that was, as far as fun goes, it was a lot of work, but that was fun. I mean, where else can you go around and chew up lieutenants and, it's a great job. We got new lieutenants in, and, well, one time it was funny, we had one of my sergeants out in the motor pool. He came up to me and said, you gotta do something about that new lieutenant. I said, why? He said, he's out here blowing smoke and chewing on people, and you don't know what he's talking about. I said, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. So I went over and I got this lieutenant, and I reamed on him pretty good. He said, you can't talk to me that way, I'm an officer. I said, yes, I can. I just did. Well, I'm going to go talk to the commander. So the commander was a friend of mine. He was a captain, and we got along pretty well. And he wanted to talk to the commander and complained. And so they sent somebody out to the motor pool to get me and said, yeah, the commander wants to see you. So I went in there, and here's this lieutenant, the captain. The captain says, did you chew out the lieutenant? And I said, yep. I said, because he's stupid. And the commander says, okay. He looked at the lieutenant and he says, do what this guy tells you, he knows what he's talking about. Get the hell out of here. And so that was the end of that. But yeah, some of the young officers needed some training. not their fault, they just didn't know. And when they get their commission, they get the crazy idea that now they know everything and they don't. So my first advice to any young officer that reported in, because my civilian job, I was the commander's full-time counterpart. So when they reported in, I'd tell these new officers, this is after I was commissioned, but I'd tell these new officers that reported in, AGRs, active duty guard and reserve. But when they'd come in, they'd report in my office. There are two things I want you to do. Find a good senior NCO and have him teach you what the Army's all about. Secondly, stay out of my way because the lieutenants irritate me. Yes, sir. And most of them turned out pretty darn good. Most of them did.
Good.
Some of them didn't, but they didn't stick around too long.
Looking back, would you do it all the same over again, or would you make any changes?
Uh,
Or done something different?
yeah, going back, I would have gone for a commission sooner. Because what happened to me, and the reason I had to retire in '05, is because the time just caught up to me. My timing was off. And if I'd have got commissioned earlier, I probably would have retired with a star. Because I had everything in place, but the timing was off. And so I would have started my commission career earlier. But I had 15 years enlisted, that's okay. And then after I retired, I took a job as a civilian contractor. And that job was to help Guard and Reserve soldiers find civilian employment.
Okay.
And in about a 2-year period of time, I helped about 1,500 soldiers find jobs. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Did you go to college too while you were in?
Nope.
Nope.
I did all my training in the military.
Okay. Awesome. So, still do it all over again, but just go earlier to be an officer.
I'd do the commission thing earlier. Because that would benefit me better.
Okay. So, looking back here at the end, is there anything that highlight that kicks out that you want to talk about or let people know about that happened while you're in? Even
No,
fun,
just,
right?
I'd probably do everything pretty much the same, with the exception of starting my commission career earlier. And I probably, of course, you don't know, I mean, my family situation was such that I wanted to stay fairly close to home. That's why I went into reserve, but if I didn't have that situation, I'd have gone active duty. I'd have just probably done a 20-year active duty career. But you gotta do what you gotta do.
So, this many years later, has there ever been any one that just always sticks in your mind of person you remember?
Oh, when I met Colin Powell when he was Force Com commander. A friend of mine was the senior reserve advisor to the Force Com commander. And so I was coming through Atlanta, coming back from Florida one time, so I stopped to see John, my buddy. And he said, "Do you want to go see the general?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Come on, he's a great guy." Okay. So we went up to his office, and the secretary said, "Can I help you?" "Yeah." And Colonel Topper says, "We'd like to go in and see the general if he's got time." And so she buzzed him. Next thing you know, the door opens, here's Colin Powell. "Come on in, guys." So we went in, and I said, and it was like I'd known this guy for years. I mean, just a super nice guy. And we sat there and drank coffee and shot the bull for about an hour. And the secretary said, "Sir, you have another appointment." Yeah, I know. I'll get to it." And so anyway, but what a guy. And then about, probably a year later, one of the guys in the garrison in Detroit, he was the XO. He was On the civilian side, he had some job with a steel company or something. But he said, you want to go to a lunch at the Detroit Businessman's Association or something? I said, sure. He said, well, our speaker is Colin Powell. I said, okay. So we went, and he said, come on, let's go up and meet him. Well, they had the head table. So we walked up there to meet him, and this guy's in uniform, and he shakes his hand, sir, good to meet you, I'm so-and-so. And Powell looks over, and he said, Bauman, what are you doing here? I says, I work in Detroit. You do? I said, yeah. He said, ah, good to see you. And he shook my hand, and he says, yeah, great to see you. And so he remembered, which I thought was pretty cool. Well, then one of my supply sergeants really thought Powell was a great guy. He said, man, this guy's good. And Powell wrote his book. And so I thought, well, I'm going to buy Sergeant Story one of those books. And we'll go over there and I'll get Powell to sign it. So we got over, and my mom thought Powell was pretty cool, so I went over and I bought 3 books. One for me, and one for Mom, and one for Story. And so I'm carrying 3 books. Well, this gal at the head of the line, and the way they do these signings, if you've never been to one of them, they have the signer sitting there with a table, and then there's a couple people sitting with them, and then you go past in front of them, but you can't only get maybe 10 feet away, you know. And so anyway, I got to the end of the line, they're starting through, and the gal said, how many books do you have? I said, 3. She said, you can only have 1. I said, no, he'll do 3. No, he'll only sign 1 per person. I said, he'll sign 3. I know it. And so she said, yeah, okay. So anyway, whatever. So she took all 3 books. So I got to where he was signing the books, and I'm right in front of him, and I says, hey, General, how you doing? He looked up, Bauman, I keep running into you, he says. This is like a year after the second time. And so he says, he looked at Story, and he said, Sergeant, are you with him? And Story said, yes, sir. He said, well, pay attention to him. He knows what he's doing. So I thought that was kind of nice. So yeah, so Powell was probably the coolest guy I ever knew during my career. I mean, what a great guy he was, you know. Super great guy. And so yeah, to answer your question, I'd say he was probably the most interesting.
So, anything else you want to say before?
No, I think I'm all set.
Well, thank you very much, Mel. We appreciate it,
Yep.
and you have a great day.
Okay.